Hi everyone, I'm Norman Bolter. This is Frequency Bone Summer Music Connection 11, video 5, in the series called Making the Most of What We Have. And this is going to be about making the most of rhythm. Now that's a giant subject. All these are giant subjects. I'm trying to have shorter videos for them. In the past few years, sometimes the videos would go on for a while, but I'm trying to make them a little shorter, just to see how I feel about that and to see if it helps people's ability to digest. The only thing is, no matter how long the video is, since it's a video, you can go back and see it, which I suggest you do if you're actually serious about it. So, in looking at rhythm, this is tying back to video 4, which we were looking at the tripod of music expression in the physical worlds, which is rhythm, pitch, and timbre. I believe that's the tripod of music's appearance here. We looked at timbre last time. Today we're going to look at rhythm. So that's the title of this video, is making the most of your rhythm, really. Like I said, that's giant territory. Maybe the first thing you might think is metronome. How can I make my dotted 8th and 16th notes not sound so triplet-like? The band director keeps saying I'm behind. Right? So we have steadiness of tempo, and then we have all the different multiple figures that create different rhythmic impulses and nuances. And those are huge, okay? But how to approach it in terms of playing? And what's curious to me is rhythm gets into articulation. It gets into articulation for me. So I don't know exactly how this is going to go. For a while I was thinking maybe this should be on articulation. And if it was an articulation, how could we not incorporate rhythm into it? So why don't we just call it rhythm articulation? Wow, which I just thought of this. That's what Pasquale Bona, in his famous book that my teacher, Mr. Zelmer, worked out of with me, and I work with all my students out of it, called Rhythmical Articulation. It makes sense now. It's not that it didn't, I just never put it together that way. Because if I'm going to work on certain rhythms, okay, or articulations. Let's say I'm going to work on certain articulation. I want accents. What kind? What kind of accents? No, that was not a complex rhythmical figure. But I was trying to put a little head. I don't know. I don't have a great miking system. But if you could hear the dum, 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 it almost had a quasi-pizzicato feel. At least that was what was in my mind. Doom, 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 doom. Now, do you hear a lot of people play with that kind of articulation anymore? Not too often. Not in classical music. The style of articulation has changed a lot since I started playing the trombone. And one of my teachers, Stephen Zelmer, was very Chicago trained, so they had an articulation that was very matched with the sound. Didn't have an overly hard head on it, but certainly had an enunciation. My other teacher, when I was growing up, was Ronald Ricketts. And he had a nice, crisp articulation, and he could play much shorter than Mr. Zelmer. Stephen Zellmer didn't really play that short in comparison to how Ronald Ricketts was playing. So if we want to really work on rhythm, we can say, well, we're going to take one note and we're going to play different rhythms on it with a certain kind of articulation. Let's say our home base articulation, whatever that is for you. Some people's might be a little more pointed, or it might be more rounded, which is more of, I think, today what people are looking for. So we're doing that simple rhythm. Don, 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 don. So then someone can say, oh yeah, working on rhythm, that means you have to subdivide. But subdivide doesn't have to be as chopped up as it sounds. It can have a fluidity. If you look at a stream, I love to tie things back into real life, into nature. If you look at a stream, you can see, depending on how strong the wind is, but there's a flow, and you can see some waves on the top, and then you can see some other types of movement, sometimes circular, sometimes little eddies, things flowing this way and that way, little bubbles appear. There's so much. It's so dense with, look at all of that stuff going on. We try to simplify it when we come to the trombone. But when we add subdivision to it, we can add some of this natural intricacy by not thinking choppy subdivision, but by thinking it is more streamlike, for example. Now, as soon as I clicked my mind into that, I felt a much more natural progression from one note to the other. My air assumed a direction it didn't feel like it totally had before. So it's such a fascinating thing when you take one subject and you see how much more gets involved. The kind of airflow, the kind of placement you might have for your articulation, direction. And so, how can we really work on articulation without then working on tone? We can, but we're going to have a tone while we're playing with our articulation, while we're thinking about rhythm. So getting a little more simple with it. Pretend, you ever see, like maybe some of your percussion friends, they have a drum pad. They have a drum pad. Where I don't look so short in my video. And they take it, they tap out little different rhythms. Notice there's not a giant variation in pitch. It's a one monotone thing. And we can do that on different notes. But starting on one note. So I meant we can do it on different notes, but if we start on one note and feel that feeling of the different rhythm with the kind of articulation we're going for, it'll make it easier. That's what I call the one-note model. Stephen Zellmer used to say, well, if you can't play it as is, set it up on a middle B flat. I say set it up on a note that you feel comfortable with. So let's say we have the rhythm. So we can say, if you're a trombone player, hey, that sounds like an excerpt. Well, you're right. I was playing it very carefully. I wasn't really playing it inside of the musical style I would like to play it with. So I was isolating it. So simplification can be an isolation of something where you, okay, take some of the musical character away for now and just kind of work on that one area. However, that one area is going to change when you add the musical character. And now what are we getting into? The integration of rhythm, pitch, and timbre. The integration of technique and the spirit of the music. That's why I never totally isolate them. I'll start that way, and it always ends that it starts to come together. Now I'm going to try to do it, that little excerpt in the style, the spirit of the music, but on one note. So, for me, that felt easier to play that way. I don't know if it's because then my eyebrows really started moving or what. But that part of me that gets enthusiastic about the music had to come in and join the technique. Now, I could say to myself, well, look, just play it very dry. So dry went right away to something short in my mind. Curious, because then I would say, what's the matter with me? Can I play it long and dry? You see what this starts to open up and discover? So let's look into, if it was instead of dry, what about more wet? Seemed like it was easier to play it longer, a little wetter. No, 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 no. And I could even have played it much longer than that, like legato. And you could even say that that was wetter. But this gets into interesting. You could say someone's very wet in their emotions. Or someone's very dry in their nature, in their emotions, or the way they express them. So if you practice your rhythms with different feelings, then you start to see how it can change. Wow, I can play dryly and crisp really well, but if I have to actually have it be more of a moving, a little bit more emotionally fluid, it's harder for me. Or maybe it's the other way around. So what does this stuff do? We discover. We discover our can-do points and our points where we're pretty gray, and maybe even our can't-do points. That's what's great. So the isolation is really, let's work on rhythm. Now, years ago, if I was going to play that kind of rhythm, where it had a sequence, right, from quarters to eighths to triplets to sixteenths to sextuplets to, 30 seconds, I would have been able to single-tongue it. But now, once it got into theka, 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 I had to go into my double, triple tongue. So you see how long we could work on rhythm? That's just a teeny bit. I think we're going to have another video on this one. What do you think?